All right, so we're now continuing on with Chapter 3, that's Stress and Health Psychology, Part 2. Okay, so let's talk about stress of the immune system. Knowledge that psychological factors have considerable control over infectious diseases has upset the long-held assumption in biology and medicine that these diseases are strictly physical. Yet, the clinical and theoretical implications are so important that a new field of biopsychology has emerged, that being psychoneuroimmunology. This is being the biological response to stress changes the activity of the immune system, which is involved in increasing risk of cancer, periodontal disease, the common cold, bursitis, colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, as well as Alzheimer's disease. So remember, psychoneuroimmunology is that interdisciplinary field that studies the effects of psychological factors on the immune system. Okay, so now looking at stress and cognitive functioning. How stress affects the brain. When we're speaking about short term, remember, cortisol helps us to deal with immediate dangers that's increasing our immunity and mobilizing our energy resources. However, it also can prevent the retrieval of existing memories, as well as the laying down of new memories and general information processing. So this interference with cognitive functioning, it helps explain why you may forget important information during an important exam, which hopefully won't happen when you take your exam next week, and why people may become dangerously confused during a fire and can't find the fire exit. The good news is that once the cortisol washes out, usually your memory performance will return back to normal levels. Now, when we're talking about long term, in addition to the problems with cognitive functioning during acute stress, Sapolsky has shown that prolonged stress can permanently damage the hippocampus, and it's a key part of the brain that's involved with your memory. Furthermore, once that hippocampus is damaged, it cannot provide proper feedback to the hypothalamus. So what happens is cortisol will continue to be secreted and a vicious cycle will start to develop. Stress and cancer. Cancer is among the leading causes of death for adults in the United States. It occurs particularly with the type of primitive body cells that begins to rapidly divide, and then it forms a tumor that invades healthy tissue. Cancer appears to be caused by an interaction between environmental factors such as what we eat, if you smoke, the pollutants in the air, and inherited predispositions, as we talked about earlier. Now, it's important to note that research does not support those popular myths that stress causes cancer or that positive attitudes can fight off cancer. Stress causes the adrenal glands to release hormones that suppress our immune system. It's a compromised immune system that's less able to resist infection or to be able to fight off those cancer cells. So one example would be researchers interrupted the sleep of 23 men, and then what they did was they measured their natural killer cells. Now, a killer cell is a type of immune system cell. What they did was they found the number of killer cells was about 28% below average. And yeah, make a note of that, 28% below average. So what you see is how staying up late studying for an exam, like if you went out and hung out and partied, it actually can decrease the effectiveness of your immune system. Fortunately though, these researchers was able to find that a normal night's sleep after the deprivation usually returns the killer cells to their normal levels. Now, when we're speaking about stress and the cardiovascular disorders, when our body is stressed, the autonomic nervous system is going to release epinephrine, or otherwise known as adrenaline, as well as cortisol into our bloodstream. These hormones will increase our heart rate. It might release fat as well as glucose from the body storage to give muscles a readily available source of energy. If no physical fight or flight action is taken, and this is most likely the case within our time, the fat is going to be released into the bloodstream will not burn as fuel. Instead, it may adhere to our walls of blood vessels. And these fatty deposits are a major cause of blood supply blockage, which causes heart attacks. So, just remember, stress does not contribute to heart disease. It's the other way around. It does, okay? Fat is released as fuel in response to our stress. And if we don't use it as within fight or flight, and think about again the autonomic nervous system, um, then what happens is that fat's going to start sticking to the walls and start blocking our arteries. That blockage of arteries that supplies blood to the heart is going to be that major reason for heart disease to develop. So we need to be able to reduce our stress, and that can be done through exercising, eating, having a proper diet, lifestyle change. I don't like the word diet because diets, we tend to set ourselves up for failure. But through lifestyle changes of what we eat, will help to prevent that buildup of fatty deposits along the arteries. Now, research challenge. Does stress cause gastric ulcers? Stop and pause this video, take a look and read this. And then what I would like for you to do is kind of label what type of methods these are, okay? If it's going to be an experimental method, then I want you to make sure you label the independent variable to the dependent variable. Be able to explain the experimental group as well as the control group. If you're looking at the descriptive method, was it a naturalistic observation, or was surveys used, or was it a case study? You also want to be able to understand correlation methods, being a positive, negative, or zero correlation, as well as looking at the research entailed for a biological method. Will we use brain scans or so forth? Once you've gone through that, jot down those answers, keep them handy. You might need them for an assignment. And then we'll move forward. All right. So with stress, when we're talking about stress and we're talking about cardiovascular disorders, believe it or not, our personality plays a large part with this. The effects of stress on heart disease can be amplified if a person tends to be hard driving, competitive, ambitious, or impatient, or hostile. This type of personality, we call that a type A personality. The antithesis of the type A personality would be type B. And basically, these individuals would be considered more laid back. They have a relaxed attitude toward life. They tend to be able to allow things to go over their head without becoming overly upset or de-stressed. They appear to have more eustress within their lives. The constant stress that's associated with our cynical type of hostilities or constantly being watched for problems will translate physiologically into more high blood pressure. Your heart rate is going to go chaotic, the production of stress related hormones. Additionally, people who are hostile or suspicious, could be argumentative or competitive, they'll tend to have more of that interpersonal conflict. And what that does is heighten our autonomic activation, leading to increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Based upon what? The fact that more cortisol is going to be pumped, that adrenaline is going to be going when we don't want it to, and so forth. Now, another pause, but this one you won't have to worry about. This is just for you to kind of identify yourself. Are you a type A or type B individual? And before you ask yourself or say, well, Dr. Kearns-Cooper, can it be either or? There are times we might fall on one end of the spectrum compared to another. But if you look at these questions and answer them to yourself, I want you to take time to write down the number that's on the scale that would best characterize your behavior for each of the following traits. Once you do that, multiply it by 3. Okay? This is going to tell you how you might be able to see if there be any type of health issues in your future. And if it is higher, then you might want to be able to consider changing some of your behaviors to kind of help decrease the risk. So just know that a total of 120 or more would indicate that you are a hardcore type A. Okay? If it falls within 90, then you're leaning more toward being, if it's below 90, let me put it that way, then you're more of a type B individual. So the following will help give you some more specifics. Okay? Remember, if you're 120 or more, type A. Okay? If you're at 106, well, I'll say A plus, type A plus, hardcore. If you're at 106 to 119, then you're type A, but you're right there at that threshold. If you're at 100 to 105, then you might be A minus, where yeah, you have some of those traits, but you're waiting toward getting toward that middle point. Okay, at 90 or 99, then you're at the B plus, and B plus is, well, you're at that laid back component. Okay, less than 90, you are B, meaning you can be relaxed, you can let things shoot over your head, no problems, no worries. Okay, so take a moment, go ahead and pause this video and answer the question for yourself. So to continue on talking about personality characteristics as well as positive psychology, let's look at hardiness. Hardiness is a resilient personality that has a strong commitment toward their personal goals. Individuals will have control over their life, as well as being able to view change as a challenge instead of a threat. Sometimes you have individuals that just are afraid of change. People that are considered hardy are willing to accept new changes coming in, and they don't see it as something that's going to hurt them, but actually something to help to propel them. So know that with hardiness, this is something we learn. It's not automatically within us. We have to develop our hardiness. Then, so what I want you to try to do, if you noticed on the slide, you had commitment emphasized, the C, control emphasized, as well as change. Those are the 3 C's. When you come up to taking this test, and yes, we have an exam, and I said next week, but it's actually really at the end of this week, you want to be fully committed to your education. Understand that you can control your exams by making sure that you study appropriately for them, arrange it through your schedule, and be able to welcome that challenge of sitting before the computer and taking the exam, and knowing that because you put in the work that you will do well in it. So those are the 3 C's: commitment, control, and change. And guess what? You've worked on your level of hardiness. Now, when we talk about positive psychology, research in positive psychology offers 3 research-based techniques that's going to help you to be able to reduce your level of stress, be able to decrease any type of sadness that can lead to depression, as well as increase your level of happiness. So what I'd like for you to do is first take time to see what you can do. The first being 3 good things you could find within your life. Write them down. What went well for you today? Do this every day for a week. The second thing is start to look and notice your signature strengths. Okay? Start recording those efforts. Be mindful. Mindfulness is something that has grown within the last few years. You know, we live life often without really looking at or feeling what's going on around us, being truly aware. Take a moment, think about things that's going on with you. What is going on with your body at that time? You want to be able to observe your physical, your mental, as well as your emotional experience. When you do that, believe it or not, your level of stress reduces because you have more control by understanding that. Okay? So, I have to pause one moment because a spider just fell on my my computer. Give me 1 second. All right, so I apologize for that interruption. It wasn't a spider. I really don't know what it was. You know, something always crawling on somebody when they come from outside. Let's hope it's gone. I can't find it now. But anyway, this moment I'm going to keep moving forward, but do stop and take a moment for yourself and actually try doing it for a week, and hopefully it'll help you out as far as reducing your stress in regards to your studies. All right, so now it's time to talk about some of the disorders that occur for people because of some extraneous stressors. Okay, post-traumatic stress disorder, better known as PTSD for many folks. PTSD is an essential feature that's regarding severe anxiety. And I mean, this is a state of constant or reoccurring alarm and fearfulness for a person that usually develops after experiencing a traumatic event. Learning about a violent or unexpected death of a family member, or it can even be a witness or a bystander to a violent occurrence. Now, when we're talking about some of these with post-traumatic stress disorder, know that it is an anxiety disorder. And again, usually exposure to a life-threatening or an extreme event. And I mean, it can be a car accident, you know, someone who might have been raped. Um, it usually will have that kind of impact in which a person might start suffering and show symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. 70% of adults definitely have experienced some type of severe traumatic event. 20% of those individuals will probably develop symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, PTSD again is severe anxiety and it develops again after a traumatic event. So, usually when we're learning about a violent or unexpected death of a family member, again, it can be just being a witness to a traumatic situation is when symptomology might occur. One of the things that I would like for you to do is take a look at this slide here, and it's talking about how it's identifying post-traumatic stress disorder as well as ways that's being able to cope with a particular crisis. So one example being, and I'll ask you to pause the video so that you can read through all, but some of the symptoms is being able to a person re-experience an event. They may have extremely vivid memories or flashbacks. Um, Take a person who was in a car accident. Once they've had that car accident, if the car was coming toward them, then that means anytime a car is crossing the intersection, they might have a flashback of the original accident. Might start feeling, when they say emotionally numb meaning is just a void. You just You're not sure how to feel, happy, sad, bad. You don't know what to feel at that moment. It's just like everything closes in on you. You may start beginning to feel overwhelmed by daily functioning. Everyday situations might just feel really hard and difficult to deal with. Might find uncontrollable crying to occur. Another type of feelings can be difficulties with being able to fall asleep or staying asleep. You might find yourself sleeping too much or too little. Or you might have nightmares. There might be feelings of guilt in regards to if someone had passed on. Survivor's guilt may occur. Or feeling helpless because there's a sense of doom and not knowing how the future is going to be. There are ways to being able to help deal with it. So the first one is listed is talking about how if you did go through that type of experience, to be able to recognize your feelings about this situation and don't hold it in. Talk to others about those fears. Know that these are feelings that's normal in terms of this type of situation. If you know someone who has been traumatized, you want to be willing to listen, and I mean patiently listen. Sometimes we'll say, yeah, we want to be supportive and listen, and we turn that listening into actually a dead ear and not really pay attention to what's being said. So you want to know and understand what the person's going through. And you want to pay attention to their feelings as well as encourage them to get help if they need help. Again, patience is a key factor. You want to be patient with people. Tempers, if you have a short temper, try to keep it in check during times of crisis. Know that you're not the only one that might be stressed at that moment. Be able to recognize those normal crisis situations and reactions, such as when there's sleep disturbances, or if you're having nightmares, or you have feelings of withdrawal, or you find yourself going back to doing things that you did when you were a child, or your a level of attention changes. Kind of keep aware of that. The more aware, again, mindfulness, is the better it is that you can keep control. When it comes to children, take time with your children, your spouse, your partners, your friends. Enjoy life. When you find yourself feeling overly stressed or overwhelmed, that's the time you need to connect with others. Don't be alone. All right, so now I'm going to stop here. Part three will continue in talking about health psychology as well as stress management.